In the beginning, before the stars painted the night sky, before the oceans roared against ancient shores, before the first breath of wind rustled through leaves, there was darkness. And in this darkness, there was the Word, there was purpose, and there was God. The story I'm about to share with you isn't just any tale. It's the first story ever told, passed down through generations, carefully preserved in what we know as the Torah, the sacred text that has guided millions for thousands of years. The Torah, our living tree of wisdom, begins not with rules or commandments, but with a story of beginnings, of choices, and of what it truly means to be human. Picture yourself holding an ancient scroll, its parchment weathered by time, its words inscribed with unwavering precision. Each letter, each stroke, carries the weight of centuries. This scroll begins with the letter Bet, B, the very first letter of Genesis. Our sages teach us that this letter was chosen because it's closed on three sides but open in the front, suggesting that we shouldn't ask what came before creation, but instead look forward to understand what comes next. And so begins our journey into the most fundamental story of human existence. Before there were nations, before there were tribes, before there were even families, there were two people, two souls who would shape the destiny of all humanity. Their names echo through time, Adam and Eve. But to understand their story, your story, our story, we must first understand the world into which they emerged. A world fresh with possibility, where the very breath of God still lingered in the morning dew, where every sunrise was the first sunrise, where every discovery was the first discovery. This isn't just a story from the past. It's a mirror that reflects our own struggles, our own choices, our own search for purpose. As we delve into this narrative, you'll recognize pieces of yourself, your questions, your challenges, your aspirations, in these first humans who walked the earth. So join me as we turn back the pages of time to the very beginning, when the universe was young and humanity took its first steps in a garden called Eden. This is where our story begins. This is where your story begins. Before time itself took its first breath, there was nothing but void and darkness. Then, with words that would forever echo through eternity, God spoke. Let there be light. And light burst forth, scattering the darkness like startled birds, painting the universe with the first rays of dawn. This was the first day. On the second day, God's voice rang out again, separating the waters above from the waters below. A great expanse stretched between them, the heavens themselves, vast and beautiful, a crystal dome arching over creation. The waters below still covered everything until the third day dawned. God gathered the waters into mighty seas, and from the emerging earth sprouted the first seeds of life. Trees reached their branches. Toward the sky, flowers painted the ground with colors that had never existed before, and fruits swelled, with sweetness on every branch. Each plant held within it the seeds of its own renewal, a promise of endless cycles of life. The fourth day brought forth the great lights in the heavens. The sun took its throne in the day, while the moon became the gentle queen of night. Stars scattered across the darkness like diamonds thrown across black velvet, each one a burning reminder of the Creator's power. Life burst forth in earnest on the fifth day. The seas teemed with creatures of every kind, from the tiniest fish to the mightiest leviathan. Above, the skies filled with birds, their songs the first music to echo across the new world. Each creature received the blessing to multiply and fill their realm with life. The sixth day dawned with even greater wonders. The earth brought forth animals of every kind, wild, animals roaming free across the plains, cattle grazing on the fresh grass, and small creatures that would burrow and crawl. Each perfect, each with its own purpose. But the day was not yet complete. The stage was set for God's final and most wondrous creation. Then as the sixth day drew to its close, God looked upon all that had been made. Every star, every leaf, every creature, all part of a vast and perfect design. But the greatest wonder was yet to come. humanity, itself. And then came the seventh day. God blessed this day and made it holy, different from all other days. On this day, all creation rested. The waters stilled their rushing, the wind gentled its blow, and a profound peace settled over the world. This was Shabbat, a day that would become a window through which all future generations could glimpse the perfection of creation, a day when time itself would pause to remember its own beginning. The stage was now set. The garden was prepared. The animals roamed freely. The trees bore their fruit. And in the gentle light of that first Shabbat, the world waited for its caretakers, for those who would be created in God's own image. In the pristine silence of that new world, God reached down to the earth itself. From the rich red clay, the Adamah, divine hands gathered dust and began to shape something never before seen in creation. Like a master potter at his wheel, God molded and formed, crafting every detail with infinite care. Fingers of clay became strong and supple. A chest was sculpted to hold a heart that would feel both joy and sorrow, and a face was fashioned that would reflect the very image of its creator. Yet this magnificent sculpture lay still, perfect but lifeless. Then came the moment that would change everything. God leaned close and breathed into the nostrils of this clay figure, not just air, but the very breath of life itself, Nishmat Chaim. The chest rose, color flooded the clay, and Adam's eyes opened for the first time, filling with wonder at the world around him. Adam stood, the first human to ever walk the earth, and found himself in a garden beyond imagination. Eden. Rivers of crystal clear water flowed through the landscape, nurturing trees laden with fruits of every kind. The air was sweet with the scent of flowers that had never known winter's touch. 4 mighty rivers divided and watered the garden, the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, each bringing life to different corners of this paradise. In this perfect garden, Adam was not merely a guest. God spoke to him, giving him a sacred purpose. Be the caretaker of my garden, watch over it, tend it, help it grow. Adam's hands, though newly formed, knew exactly how to gentle the soil, how to guide the vines, how to nurture each plant. He walked among the trees, learning their secrets, understanding their needs. The tree of life stood at the garden's heart, its leaves shimmering with immortality, and beside it grew the tree of knowledge of good and evil, mysterious and forbidden. Then came one of Adam's greatest tasks. God brought before him every living creature, the mighty lions, with their golden manes, the graceful gazelles, the clever foxes, the colorful birds that filled the air with song. Each animal approached Adam, and from his lips came their true names, words that captured the essence of each creature. The eagle's name spoke of soaring majesty, the doves of gentle peace, the ants of diligent wisdom. As he named each one, Adam began to understand their nature, their purpose in the great tapestry of creation. Yet with each name he gave, Adam felt something stirring in his heart, a longing he couldn't quite name. Among all these creatures, magnificent as they were, none could share the depths of his thoughts. None could join in his songs of praise. None could be a true companion to his soul. God had given him the first commandment, to be the guardian of this paradise, to work it and to keep it. Adam threw himself into this holy task, his days filled with purpose. His hands learned to guide young shoots toward the sun, to prune branches for better growth, to gather the sweet fruits that hung heavy on the boughs. He walked in the cool of the evening with God, learning the deep wisdom of creation. But even as he lived in this perfect garden, even as he fulfilled his sacred duty, even as he spoke with God and tended to every living thing, Adam's heart whispered of something missing. In all of Eden's perfection, he was alone. And God, who had shaped him from the dust, who had breathed life into his lungs, who had given him dominion over all living things, looked upon Adam's solitude and said the words that would change everything. It is not good for man to be alone. In the perfect quiet of Eden, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, Adam felt an emptiness that even the beauty around him couldn't fill. The songbirds had their mates, the gazelles, bounded in pairs through flowering meadows. Even the smallest creatures found companionship among their kind. But Adam walked alone. God watched as his cherished creation named every beast of the field and every bird of the sky, seeing how Adam's eyes would light up at each new discovery, only to dim again in solitude. Though he spoke with God in the garden's gentle breezes and found joy in tending to Eden's splendors, something was missing. The words echoed through creation. Lo tov heyot ha-adam levado. It is not good for man to be alone. As twilight settled over Eden like a soft blanket, God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam. This was no ordinary slumber, but a divine sleep. Tardema, deep and mysterious. As Adam lay sleeping among the roses and lilies, God performed the most wondrous surgery ever known. With infinite tenderness, he took, not from Adam's head, that she should rule over him, nor from his feet, that she should be beneath him, but from his side, a rib close to his heart, that she should walk beside him as an equal. From this single rib, God crafted his final masterpiece. Like a master jeweler working with the most precious of gems, he shaped and formed, creating not just a companion, but a perfect complement to Adam. Every detail was formed with exquisite care, wisdom in her eyes, grace in her movements, strength in her spirit. She would be Ezer Kenegdo, a helper corresponding to him, like two pieces of a divine puzzle finally coming together. When Adam opened his eyes, he beheld what his heart had been missing all along. There she stood, crowned by the last rays of sunset, more beautiful than anything he had ever named or known. For the first time, words failed the man who had named all living things. Then from the depths of his soul came the first poetry ever spoken, the first love song ever sung. This one at last is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, Isha, for from man-ish was she taken. God smiled upon them both, blessing this first union with words that would echo through all generations. Therefore shall a man leave his father and mother, and cleave unto his wife, and they shall become one flesh. This was the first marriage blessed under the open skies of Eden, witnessed by all of creation. Together they stood in their garden home, neither clothed nor ashamed, their souls as naked and pure as their bodies. They were two halves of one soul, finally reunited. Eve brought completion to creation, the final brushstroke on God's masterpiece. In her, Adam found not just a companion, but a partner in the sacred task of tending to Eden and all its wonders. Each sunset painted new colors across their paradise. Each morning brought fresh discoveries as they explored their garden home together. They walked with God in the cool of the day, their hearts beating in harmony with all creation. Their love was pure, untouched by doubt or fear, a reflection of the divine love that had created them both. But even in this perfect union, in this flawless garden, a test awaited them. For among all the trees of plenty, among all the gifts they had been given, there stood one tree that would challenge everything. Each morning in Eden dawned like the first morning of creation. Dew sparkled like diamonds on every leaf, and the air itself tasted of sweetness. Adam and Eve walked hand in hand through their paradise, where every step brought new wonders. Rivers of crystal waters wound through the garden like ribbons of light, their gentle music a constant song of life and peace. Here in this perfect garden stood trees of every kind, their branches heavy with fruits never known to the world that would come after, figs sweeter than honey, pomegranates that sparkled like rubies, and fruits whose names would be lost to time. But among all these treasures grew two trees unlike any other, standing at the very heart of Eden. The first was the tree of life, its leaves shimmering with an otherworldly light. Its branches reached toward heaven like arms raised in eternal praise, and its very presence promised immortality. Near it stood another tree, equally beautiful but bearing a different promise, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Its fruit gleamed with a mysterious allure, holding secrets that neither Adam nor Eve yet understood. God walked with them in these perfect days, his presence as natural as the breeze that rustled through the leaves. Their conversations flowed like the garden's rivers, full of wisdom and wonder. Every sunset brought new understanding, every sunrise new discoveries. They learned the rhythms of the garden, which flowers opened at dawn, which birds sang at dusk, how to gentle the most delicate shoots and guide the strongest vines. One divine commandment shaped their days, simple yet profound. From every tree of the garden you may freely eat, God had told them, his voice both gentle and firm. But from the tree of knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for on the day you eat of it you shall surely die. They accepted this command with the pure trust of children, understanding it as naturally as they understood the rising of the sun. Their life was a dance of perfect innocence. They walked unclothed and unashamed, their nakedness as natural as the petals of a flower. No shadow of doubt darkened their thoughts. No whisper of discontent disturbed their peace. Eve's laughter rang through the garden like silver bells, and Adam's songs of praise joined with the chorus of creation. Each evening, as the sun painted the sky in colors that would never be seen again, they would rest beneath the stars, their hearts beating in rhythm with the pulse of Eden itself. They knew neither fear nor shame, neither sorrow nor pain. Their love was as pure as the morning light, untouched by the knowledge that would one day change everything. But in this perfect garden, amid this perfect peace, something stirred. Among the shadows of the tree of knowledge, a presence watched and waited. The greatest test of their trust in God was about to begin. Among all the creatures in Eden, none was more cunning than the serpent. Unlike the serpents we know, today this creature walked upright, its scales gleaming like polished bronze in the sunlight. Its eyes held in ancient wisdom, and its voice, when it chose to speak, flowed like honey, sweet yet somehow unsettling. On that fateful day, as Eve walked alone near the tree of knowledge, the serpent's voice drifted to her like a whisper on the wind. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? The question hung in the air, innocent yet loaded with hidden purpose. Eve paused, her hand trailing along a nearby branch as she turned to face the creature. We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, she replied, her voice clear and certain. But God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it or you will die. The serpent's laugh was soft, almost musical. It moved closer, its body catching the light in hypnotic patterns. You will not certainly die, it said, its words weaving a spell of doubt. For God knows that. When you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Eve found herself drawn closer to the tree she had passed 100 times before. Now she truly looked. At its fruit, really looked. How had she never noticed how beautiful it was? The fruit hung perfect and ripe, catching the sunlight like jewels. It seemed to pulse with promise, with secrets waiting to be discovered. The serpent's words echoed in her mind. Like God, knowing good and evil. Wasn't knowledge a good thing? Hadn't God given them minds to think, to understand? The fruit looked so good, so wise. Surely, wisdom itself couldn't be wrong. Her hand trembled as she reached out. The garden seemed to hold its breath. Birds fell silent, leaves stilled. Their rustling, even the rivers seemed to quiet their flow. The fruit was cool and smooth in her palm, perfect in every way. She took a bite. The taste was unlike anything she had known. Sweet, yes, but with something else, something that seemed to wake every part of her being. And in that moment, everything changed. The garden looked different, somehow as if a veil had been lifted from her eyes. Adam was there then, Had he been watching? Had he just arrived? Time seemed to blur in that moment. Eve turned to him, the fruit still in her hand, her eyes wide with this new knowledge. Without a word, she offered it to him. And Adam, seeing the change in his beloved's face, took the fruit from her hand. He didn't hesitate. He didn't question. In a choice that would echo through all of human history, Adam bit into the fruit. The taste had barely left their tongues when the change swept over them both. The peaceful innocence that had wrapped them like a garment fell away. For the first time, they looked at each other and felt something new, shame. Their nakedness, once as natural as the petals of a flower, now seemed wrong, exposed. The sun still shone just as brightly, the garden was still just as beautiful, but everything had changed. And then, carried on the evening breeze, they heard it, the sound they had always loved but now filled them with terror, the sound of God walking in the garden. The afternoon light that had once blessed them now seemed harsh and exposing. Adam and Eve's hands trembled as they rushed to gather fig leaves, desperately weaving them together to cover their newfound shame. The same bodies that had once known only innocence now felt vulnerable, exposed to eyes they'd never before thought to hide from. Then they heard it, the familiar sound that had once brought only joy, the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. But now, for the first time, fear gripped their hearts. They ran, these two, who had once walked with God in perfect communion, scrambling to hide themselves among the trees of the garden. Adam, where are you? God's voice echoed through Eden, though he knew exactly where they cowered. It was not a question of location, but an invitation to confession. Adam's voice shook as he answered from behind the foliage. I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. The next question fell like thunder in the silent garden. Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from? In that moment, the second sin followed the first. Adam, who had walked with God and named all living things, who had cherished Eve as bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh, pointed to his wife, the woman you put here with me. She gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it. When God turned to Eve, she too deflected, her voice barely a whisper. The serpent deceived me, and I ate. The judgment began with the deceiver. God turned to the serpent, his voice heavy with divine justice. Cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals. You will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust. All the days of your life, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. To Eve, who had first tasted the forbidden fruit, came the next judgment. I will make your pains in childbearing very severe. With painful labor you will give birth to children. Your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Finally, God turned to Adam. Because you listened to your wife and ate fruit from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. In a final act of mercy mingled with judgment, God made garments of skin for Adam and Eve, clothing them himself before the expulsion. But they could not stay in Eden. They could not be allowed to reach out their hands and take also from the tree of life, to live forever in their fallen state. The sun was setting as they took their last steps in paradise. Before them, God placed cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. As they looked back one last time, the garden that had been their home seemed to shimmer like a dream already fading. They stepped into the unknown world beyond Eden's gates, hand in hand. The ground was harder here, the thorns already sprouting among the plants. But in the midst of judgment, hope remained. Eve would become the mother of all living, and through her seed would come one who would crush the serpent's head. The first sunset outside of Eden painted the sky in colors of both sorrow and promise. Their innocence was lost, but their story, humanity's story, was just beginning. As the dust settled on that first path beyond Eden's gates, Adam and Eve walked into a world forever, changed by their choice. Their footprints marked the beginning of humanity's long journey, a journey that continues in each of our steps today. The echoes of that first bite still resound through time. In every choice between right and wrong, we hear the whisper of the serpent. In every moment of shame, we feel the rustle of fig leaves. In every drop of sweat that falls to the earth, we remember Adam's toil. In every mother's cry of birth, we recall Eve's burden. We are their children, carrying both their wounds and their hopes. Yet even in that moment of deepest darkness, a light had already begun to shine. Hidden within the words of judgment was the first promise of redemption, the seed of the woman who would one day crush the serpent's head. This promise would be carried like a precious flame through generation after generation. It would burn in the heart of Abel's faithful offering, survive the great flood with Noah, journey with Abraham to an unknown land, and pass through the years like a golden thread, weaving hope into humanity's story. The garden was lost, but not the dream of it. Something of Eden lives on in every act of kindness, every moment of love, every choice for good over evil. We see it in the mother who sacrifices for her child, in the farmer who tenderly tends his crops, in every human being who chooses to rise above their nature and reach for something higher. The tree of knowledge gave us wisdom, but also the responsibility to use it wisely. We gained the knowledge of good and evil, but with it came the power to choose between them. Every day we stand where Adam and Eve stood, facing choices between trust and doubt, between obedience and rebellion, between selflessness and desire. Their story teaches us that even in our failures, there is hope. Even in exile, there is purpose. The same God who clothed them in their shame still reaches out to clothe us in our need. The same God who pronounced judgment also promised redemption. The same God who closed the gates of Eden opens other doors, leading us not back to innocence, but forward to something perhaps even more precious, the wisdom to choose good, even when we know evil. And so their story becomes our story. We are all children of both dust and divine breath, of both failure and promise. Like our first parents, we live in the tension between what is and what could be, between the garden we lost and the garden we're working toward. As the sun sets on our tail, remember, the story that began in a garden doesn't end in exile. Through the corridors of time, through the pages of Torah, through the generations of humanity, a path is being carved, not back to Eden, but forward to something new. For in the end, this isn't just a story about a fall from a grace. It's a story about the beginning of our journey home.